Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Jerusalem Fund and our educational program, the Palestine Center. My name is Zaina Azzam, and I'm the executive director here, and I'm delighted to see all of you here. Welcome also to our online audience. I'm so honored to be welcoming our distinguished guest today, Dr. Hanan Ashrawi. We've all been in awe of her tireless efforts on behalf of the Palestinians over the last few decades, and also of her most articulate and sage presence on the international scene as a representative of Palestine and an advocate of Palestinian rights and the application of international law in this context. Our format today is a bit different from usual, in that I'll be asking Dr. Ashrawi a few questions rather than have her give a formal address. Afterwards, I'll open the floor for discussion so the audience can ask questions as well. Our audience watching the live stream online can tweet questions to us afterwards on @Palestine Center. And if you here or online want to participate in the conversation on Twitter, we have a special hashtag today. It's #Ashrawi_PC. PC is Palestine Center, so #Ashrawi_PC. So Dr. Ashrawi, of course, needs no introduction, but let me, however, offer a few pieces of information about her before we start our conversation. Hanan Ashrawi is a distinguished Palestinian leader, legislator, activist, and scholar. She's currently a member of the PLO Executive Committee and the Palestinian Legislative Council and head of the PLO Department of Culture and Information. She served as spokesperson of the Palestinian delegation to the Middle East peace process, beginning with the Madrid Peace Conference of 1991. She was appointed as a Palestinian Authority Minister of Higher Education and Research in 1996. She resigned from that post in protest at the non-implementation of reform plans in the governance and peace talks of 1998. Prior to that, she was Dean of the Faculty of Arts at Birzeit University and head of its Legal Aid Committee since the mid-1970s. Dr. Ashrawi was elected to the Palestinian Legislative Council representing Jerusalem in 1996, and she was re-elected for the Third Way bloc ticket in 2006. Making history as the first woman to hold a seat in the highest executive body in Palestine, she was elected as a member of the Executive Committee of the PLO in 2009. As a civil society activist, in 1999 she founded Miftah, the Palestinian Initiative for the Promotion of Global Dialogue and Democracy, and continues to serve as head of its board of directors. In the same year, Dr. Ashrawi founded the National Coalition for Accountability and Integrity. She also is the founder of the Independent Commission for Human Rights and has served as its commissioner since 1994. The awards she has received are too numerous to say, but she from all over the world. She's received many, and she is the author of many books, articles, poems, and short stories on Palestinian politics, culture, and literature. Her book, This Side of Peace, earned worldwide recognition. She has a BA and MA degrees from the American University of Beirut and a PhD in medieval and comparative literature from the University of Virginia. And she's a recipient of 11 honorary doctorates from universities in the US, Canada, Europe, and the Arab world. So with that, to start our discussion today, I'll start with a question about your organization, Miftah, Dr. Ashrawi. I know you've started 3 civil society organizations, of which I'm sure you're very proud. When I looked at the Miftah website, I saw an emphasis on civil society, good governance, and citizenship, and also a focus on the work of women and youth. Can you tell us a little bit more about Miftah, its programs, and its role in Palestinian society?
Yeah. Thank you, Zaina. Can I just say a few words of my own before
please,
I
of
answer
course.
your question? Yes. No, I'm really very grateful for your invitation. I've always had a special place in my heart for the Palestine Center, and I've been a frequent guest here. Many of you have been here before and have seen me and heard me since the 80s, I think, I started coming here. So it's been quite a while, and since the 70s, with Hisham Sharabi, yes. So we, I mean, my age is no secret, George. It's okay. It's the worst kept secret in history, and I'm fine with it because I tell them I earned my white hairs. They didn't just happen by themselves. I worked very hard to get them. You lost it. Anyway, this is like a gathering of old friends. I particularly asked Zaina to have this type of exchange, this type of interactive approach, because I felt lecturing at people, and although I'm an academic with a propensity to lecture, I still would much rather have this type of more intimate, more immediate approach, because we're all old friends, and because, yes, this takes us back. And Zaina kindly obliged to prepare a few questions to get the discussion going, and then we can have an open discussion, because I'm sure you have specific issues you wish to raise or questions you would like us to discuss. And Zaina has been a very gracious host. Thank you very much. And I'm sure that the Palestine Center is doing great work and will flourish under your leadership and guidance. Thank you, Zaina. So the first question had to do with civil society. Everybody knows that my real sense of belonging and commitment is to civil society. I'm sort of one person who resisted political office and official positions for a long time. And the only reason I accepted the PLO Executive Committee appointment is because I was elected. I wasn't appointed. And because I was elected as a result of the mutiny of the women. It's a famous story where, you know, they had all decided, all the factions and parties met and decided on a list of men, and they brought this list to the Palestine National Council, and they said, this is the list, so it's all agreed, so no need to vote. By default, just say yes, and the women said no. We want women, we want consensus women, and some people, you know, nominated a couple of men in order to challenge my nomination. It didn't work out. So the women, in spite of the instructions of their parties and factions, decided to vote for me as a candidate. And of course, some of the younger generation and the reformers and so on, which meant that this is a new phase, hopefully, in the history of the PLO. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Anyway, I'm still there, but I'm trying to make myself not irrelevant, but part of the past rather than the future, because I believe the future should be shaped by the younger generation now. And as you know, the PLO is certainly geriatric, to put it mildly. So civil society, basically, I think, is a sure safeguard for democracy, for people's participation, for a system of checks and balances, for good governance. And as you know, historically, NGOs, civil society, they worked in order to maintain Palestinian cohesion and Palestinian society under the direct occupation of Israel. Now we have an indirect occupation, but under the direct occupation where the military ran our lives. So we built our institutions, we built our universities, we built our NGOs, and we called them all a form of resistance. And a form of challenging the control of the occupation in order to build your own indigenous, authentic institutions as an expression of will and spirit of the people. So that's where I felt I belonged all my life. Anyway, Miftah is the second institution I built. The third one was the coalition we talked about. The first one was the Independent Commission for, it was Citizens' Rights, later on became Human Rights, and it became the National Human Rights Commission in Palestine, acknowledged by the Paris Protocol and so on. Miftah is a civil society institution that I established in, as you said, in 1998, actually, as a forward-looking institution in order to ensure that we do. I felt we had, first of all, a leadership crisis, and we cannot just keep saying we need new leaders. You had to help them, prepare them, give them support, give them a platform, support systems, and so on. Miftah was one, particularly women and youth. And we were among the first to start with training women and youth, not just that, but also training the media how to go to women and youth in order to get information for them, how to establish support systems, how to support them in running for elections, and so on, how to break through barriers. Many people, I said this before, and I will quote myself a few times, so you will forgive my sin. That in the States people talk about glass ceilings. At home you sometimes have brick walls, not just glass ceilings. So it's very hard to break through, and you need real support systems and solidarity systems. And Miftah did that and is still doing that. We have a network of women leadership. And by the way, once I establish an institution, I don't stay with it. I get it going, it has a structure, it has bylaws, and it has efficient people, and they continue to work. All my jobs with them are titular and voluntary because they're my children. I want to make sure that they will continue and they thrive, and they are. Miftah also ensures that we work on good governance. And therefore I established the Coalition for Accountability and Integrity, AMAN, which is an anti-corruption coalition, and which later became the Palestinian chapter of Transparency International. And all this, again, before it was very popular to talk about anti-corruption, because we felt we had to have built-in systems, and we had to have homegrown initiatives as authentic initiatives by the Palestinian people to ensure that we do have good governance, we do have accountability and integrity, and it is our job to do it. We shouldn't wait for anybody to tell us or for outside forces to tell us. So these institutions are still working. But in Miftah now we have a network of women who ran for elections, for example, women leadership. And they're not just in cities, they're not just in Ramallah or Jerusalem. They're in villages and remote areas. They're women who challenge. Because of our drive for affirmative action, we have now a quota system. We have 20%, which is not enough, but at least by law we're trying to raise this 20% women, especially also in local government elections. So you have women running in villages and challenging the men in a patriarchal society, which is not easy at all. In some cases, I mean, there were women mayors elected also. And we feel it's not enough to help them get to the position. We have to help them succeed in that position to make a difference. So we help them prepare proposals, prepare plans, prepare systems and structures and so on. And we help them when the men, for example, try to hold meetings in very conservative communities late at night, so that the woman wouldn't be able to leave her house late at night. Or they wouldn't have them in an official place, they would go to somebody's house, so you cannot go to somebody's house on your own late at night, so on. Or where the man would say, you know, give me your vote and I will go and vote on your behalf, and things like that. So we need to ensure that the women who make it, by addressing the power imbalance in our society and the inherited injustice done to the Palestinian women, that once they are in office, that they will make a difference, they will succeed. And it's not just something symbolic, that you have your symbolic woman and that's it, and so on. And Miftah is doing very well. We also have we receive delegations, we send delegations. We started also with Congress aides last year, and this year we're having a congressional delegation for the first time, which is very nice, yes, coming in end of May, late May. So this is part of it, and part of the dialogue, ongoing dialogue. We believe we have to present the Palestinian narrative in an honest and persuasive way, and of course we have to receive guests and so on and try to make them part of the understanding of the Palestinian realities on the ground. And we continue to be, as always, troublemakers when it comes to the Palestinian leadership. I've always been a troublemaker, and I will continue to be one, but it's important that you always question and challenge. And if there's anything that you think is going wrong, you should be the first to point it out and try to deal with it. And that's why now there are some problems between civil society and the government and so on, but we're hoping that we can undo a bit of the damage that was done.
Thank you. I'd like to turn to the larger situation in Palestinian society right now and invite you to look back at the last 20 years or so and offer reflections on post-Oslo life in Palestine. Can you assess the experience of the generation born after the Oslo Accords? And how is their experience of the Israeli occupation different from their parents' experience? And how is it being manifested now in Palestinian society?
Wow, Zaina, now we need a couple of hours and we'll talk about the post-Oslo period. Actually, I don't even like to call it Oslo. I call it the DOP, the Declaration of Principles. It's an agreement that was signed, as you know, in 1993 in Washington as a result of secret back-channel talks in which at a certain point Yasser Arafat, President Yasser Arafat, recognized Israel's right to exist in safe and recognized boundaries, and Rabin recognized the PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, which wasn't a very equal recognition, because we wanted the Israelis to recognize our right to self-determination and to freedom and to sovereignty on our own land. Anyway, so within this agreement, the DOP, there were lots of built-in weaknesses and flaws and problems. And what we're seeing now is the chickens coming home to roost. I mean, all the problems within the DOP and all our worst expectations have really materialized and have come back to not just to haunt us, but actually to enhance the power disequilibrium, the control of the occupier versus the occupied, and to buy Israel more time to create more facts and to act unilaterally and with full impunity without any kind of intervention or curbs. So we saw, after this great sense of hope and euphoria, and people felt that with the signing of the DOP, this is, you know, a new phase in history. This is a real paradigm shift, that this is the beginning of the devolution of occupation, evolution of statehood. You've heard me talk about this, that now we've reached out to our occupier and our oppressor, and we said we will make peace with you, and we accepted the 67 boundaries, which was a major and painful compromise by the Palestinians. Not even the 48 boundaries or the partition plan and so on. We went from all or nothing to 22%, and we thought the whole world and Israel would sit up and take notice and see this as a major opportunity. So there were tremendous expectations. Many of you were there, and many of you remember the sense that now the occupation will end, there will be a real solution, that you will have Palestinian statehood. But unfortunately, we ended up with a process for its own sake, with no relationship to reality. It did not influence the behavior of the Israeli occupation. On the contrary, as I said, it bought it more time, more cover, legal, political, economic, to pursue its policies without any curbs and to continue entrenching the occupation, so to speak. It reinvented itself. I said at one point, when we talked about devolution of occupation, evolution of statehood, we ended up with the occupation reinventing itself as a system of control, and the statehood, in a sense, being undermined entirely by these agreements that maintained Israeli ability to control our lives and to extend the transitional phase forever. We are a people living in a state of transition. That's it. Where the talks should have ended and the Palestinian state should have been declared as an independent sovereign state by the year 2000, we are still in a state of transition. Once you accept the whole principle of phases, it means Israel can extend the phase forever. That's it. Especially when they don't recognize that there is any binding timeline or commitment. When you do not, when you can renege on signed agreements and get away with it, and there's no accountability, of course you're going to do what you want because you're the powerful one. When the third party engaged in this process that has been ongoing brings its strategic alliance with Israel to bear on the talks, like the US did, then of course you're not going to hold them to account, and you're not going to end their policies and measures that are destroying the two-state solution systematically and willfully and so on. When you grant Israel legal cover, when you become its advocate internationally and so on, how do you expect to have any kind of justice in a situation like this, where the powerful party is allowed to use the full force of its power against a vulnerable population without any kind of protection? And then we were subject to all sorts of blackmail and so on. I don't want to talk about all the problems. We can, if you want, later on, what went wrong with the DOP and the agreement signed in '93. But we've reached a phase, a stage where Israel has used the process in order to create these detrimental facts, leading to the point where the very objective of the talks is being undermined. The process became an end unto itself. The objective of peace based on two-state solution, international law, and so on, is no longer an objective. There is no binding timeline. There is no arbitration, nothing. And so it went on, where Israel now, we started the talks where we had 100,000 settlers. Now you have 650,000 settlers. The settlements now are about 200 settlements throughout, not just Jerusalem and settlement blocks. By the way, don't believe that there are legal and illegal settlements. All settlements are illegal. All settlers are committing war crimes. So the settlements have expanded. Now Israel wants to control 64%, which is Area C. I don't want to go through all that, but look, in Palestine, we've always lived in a place with ancient names, with a deep-rooted, long history and culture and so on. And with the signing of the interim agreement, we ended up living in the letters of the alphabet. Palestine became areas A, areas B, areas C. And the fact that areas C are more than 60%, Israel has full control over area C. It started behaving as though it belongs to Israel. Jerusalem was annexed illegally, and there's a systematic policy and plan of ethnic cleansing in Jerusalem, creating demographic changes, transforming the very culture, the very identity of Jerusalem. Those of you who've been there would see it change over the years. Many people don't even recognize it as it is, and Jerusalem is surrounded by 3 sieges, what we call them. One is the military checkpoints that isolate Jerusalem from the rest of Palestine, and no Palestinian can go to Jerusalem unless he or she has a Jerusalem ID. So West Bankers, Gazans, and so on cannot go to Jerusalem. So they've isolated it with and surrounded it with military checkpoints at every entrance, and these are really horrific checkpoints made to order in order to ensure that Palestinians are humiliated at every checkpoint and delayed and so on, and surrounded also by 3 rings of settlements that isolate Jerusalem from its environment, the Gush Etzion in the south, the Ma'ale Adumim in the east, and the Ariel in the north. So you have Jerusalem totally cut off and surrounded by settlements. And then you have the apartheid wall. I'm sure you've seen it, you've seen pictures of it. That wall also is meant to cut off Jerusalem, as well as most Palestinian towns and cities from each other, not even from Israel and Palestine. So all these things, I mean, all the power systems that Israel had at its disposal, it used since what you call the Oslo, since '93 till now. So all the expectations, all the hopes were dashed. The sense of euphoria was totally lost. And now we have reached the point where people not only have lost faith in the process itself, but they have no trust whatsoever, first with the Israelis, because now it's very clear that this Israeli occupation is busy again, as I said, entrenching itself as a system of control, land confiscation, with what Ilan Pape calls the displacement replacement paradigm, displacing a whole people, a whole nation, replacing it with another, including the culture, including the naming of places, and so on. So that's happening. And at the same time, they're very happy to continue talks forever. Among the Palestinian youth now, the sense, they don't remember anything except the occupation, and except occupation on the rampage, and accept more systems of control. And now Israel not just escalated, stepped up its campaign of settlement activities, it also resorted to using live ammunition again, the shoot-to-kill orders, home demolitions, different forms of collective punitive measures, house demolitions, now expulsion of people. The whole families are being expelled. So this, all matters have come to a head, and this has undermined, it's not just lack of trust in Israel and the Israeli occupiers, and the term even bilateral negotiations or negotiations has become a dirty word in popular language. People don't want negotiations at all, or bilateral talks. And they feel that without international intervention, there is no solution. And it is no secret. What's happening now is that people know what Israeli intentions are. Israel is busy superimposing Greater Israel on historical Palestine. And we see it happening every day. Every day. Palestine is changing. Israel is destroying the chances of having a viable sovereign Palestinian state. It has already annexed Jerusalem and transformed it. It refuses to deal with anything related to the issue of the refugees. And at the same time, it is busy bringing in settlers and building more settlements and confiscating more lands, to the point where it carried out an ethnic cleansing of Area C, even projects and so on that were built by the European Union and the Europeans and so on, because Israel wants to empty out 64% and maintain Israeli settler presence and economic projects in the Jordan Valley, because it's a very fertile area. So here we are, and some people say that the response is that there is a sense of despair or anger or a sense of hopelessness. They don't see a political horizon. Yes, there is no political horizon. American standing certainly has been undermined. The American credibility has been undermined. People don't believe that the US in any way can be an even-handed peace broker, and they see its collusion with Israel, and they're very unhappy. And of course, now with the Obama doctrine, which we can talk about, it was very clear that it's a typical dilemma, damned if you do, damned if you don't. If the Americans intervene, then they weigh in on behalf of Israel. If they don't intervene, they leave a political vacuum which Israel fills with violence and extremism and so on. So the situation is extremely critical, and people feel that among the young, there is a sense of, yes, hopelessness, despair, but there's also a sense that they have lost faith in their own leadership. That your agenda, your peace agenda has not worked. Your, political settlement has not worked. You're using the wrong instruments with the wrong people. Israel understands, many say, the language of violence. Or Israel will not listen unless it has something to pay. There's a price to be paid. But you cannot constantly reward Israel. You cannot, in the last meeting of the Central Council, they said you cannot continue to be bound by agreements that Israel has totally violated. Why should we be bound by agreements when Israel has not been bound by any article it has signed? And it goes ahead and does what it wants. So there is this sense. There is a sense of anger and frustration, loss of hope, loss of faith, total distrust in the Israelis and the Americans. And there are, of course, people who are desperate enough to commit desperate acts. I mean, people talk about these individuals who go out, what they call the lone wolf and so on. They cannot control them, because these people, these young people who have the sense of anger and resentment, are not being regimented. They are not following orders. They are going out on their own, either to avenge the killing of a relative, a cousin, a sister, a brother, or a friend or something, or they feel that they have to do something about this occupation. And of course, they know that they're going to be shot and killed. I mean, look, this 14-year-old girl, you know, with scissors. How much of a danger did she represent to a soldier wearing, you know, bulletproof vests and a helmet and carrying machine guns and so on? You don't have to shoot to kill, which they do regularly. The settlers have created really a reign of terror, mainly in villages and isolated areas where they wreak havoc, where they challenge, where they destroy, where they kidnap, where they kill, where they destroy crops, they steal crops. The olive trees are being targeted also. And of course, they act with impunity, because the impunity that Israel practices as a state outside the law has been internalized, where its own citizens enjoy impunity. They are not held to account by any law. They can get away with killing Palestinians, as you know. Look at what happened to the killer of the Dawabshe family, look at, and the killer of Abu Khdeir, and so on. So there is a sense that you can do whatever you want to the Palestinians and get away with it. And that's why these young people now feel that they need an outlet, they need a way to express themselves. Now, it could be, yes, revenge, it could be despair, it could be hopelessness, it could be there's no way out, and so on. Or it could be that the young also are telling us, especially those who leave the, you know, who are university kids and so on, who go out and face the Israeli army at checkpoints. I remember when we used to face the Israeli army all the time. It was an assertion of will, a statement of resistance, that we are not afraid of you, that we will stand up to you. And we used to get beaten up and shot at and imprisoned and so on, so because we were expressing the fact that our spirit is not broken, that we are courageous enough to stand up to this army and to say it's time to end this occupation. They're doing what we did, those who go to the checkpoints. We didn't use weapons, we didn't have weapons, and we firmly believed in nonviolent resistance all our lives, and that's what, you know, in many ways got the world to pay attention to us. And these are the young people who are saying, okay, the same thing we told our parents. You failed. You didn't liberate Palestine. It's our turn. Now it's their turn to tell us, you know, you failed, you didn't liberate. Maybe we did something incrementally, but still they feel a tremendous sense of letdown. Now, another factor, you talked about elections. I don't see why elections should be 10 years apart. We had elections 95, 96, and 2006. And I promise you I will not run. 2016, no, we need to have elections. This division and this rift is also another debilitating factor, another source of real resentment and anger. And if you look at public opinion polls, the young are discouraged. They really don't have much faith in their elders, in the existing political system. We need the rejuvenation, relegitimization of elections. And we need to heal the rift. If we do not heal the rift, we cannot have elections. Otherwise, we will make sure it remains forever. So we need to reunify Gaza, West Bank, PLO, Fatah, and Hamas. We need to make sure that we safeguard a pluralistic, inclusive, democratic system, and we have to have elections in order to make room for the young to participate and make room for the public as a whole to hold its leadership accountable and to elect new ones, for heaven's sake, and for them to run also, because many of them feel that we skipped even a generation. There's a generation that did not have its day, you know, and now you're looking at the young kids in their 20s and teenagers and early 30s who say that it's their turn, when the people in their 40s and 50s, they say they haven't had their turn yet. So a political system that maintains itself as it is, in many ways loses its vitality, in addition to its legitimacy, in addition to the checks and balances of being held to account by the people who can either elect it or not elect it. And that's why I believe now, with matters coming to a head, with Israel escalating these policies, destroying the two-state solution and so on, we are being asked to think of new and creative ways of dealing with the situation. And to me, it is an international issue. It is not a bilateral issue. It is not a Palestinian issue. We did not choose to have Israel built on our own land, created in Palestine. We did not wake up one day and decide we don't like Israel. Israel was brought in and imposed on Palestinian land. And that is what generated all this conflict and violence and so on. So what do you propose to do about it? You cannot keep telling the Palestinians they have to be more flexible, more creative, and more flexible, and show goodwill. We've been on probation, on good behavior all our lives, to prove that we deserve those things that other people take for granted. I think it is our right to live in peace, in dignity, in freedom on our own land. And we are perfectly capable of building our own state, and building a model state, if you will. But unfortunately, we've been prevented. So this is the sense of the young generation. Disenfranchised in many ways, excluded in other ways, the oppression of the occupation being felt by every single one of us and of them at every point. And yet feeling a sense of helplessness that the leadership has not found a way out for them. Now, even if by miracle they end up, we have elections and they end up taking over, they're going to inherit a very difficult situation. Our job is to be there to give them support, not to usurp their role. Okay?
Well, speaking of the international arena, Hanan, here's some water for you.
Thank you.
My understanding is that Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is now in France. He's going on to Russia and Germany and then to the US. He's speaking in France with President Hollande to discuss France's initiative to start peace negotiations and also to introduce a UN resolution condemning Israeli settlements. Can you, in the West Bank and Jerusalem, can you tell us a little bit more about these initiatives?
Yeah. Actually, the French initiative came about as a result of a political vacuum. And when the US withdraws from the scene, there is a political vacuum, and the dynamic on the ground has become very destructive, very toxic. So the French felt that they should do something about it, take a political initiative. For years, we've been telling the Europeans that you cannot be the designated signer of checks while the Americans take all the political power. That if you are signing checks for nation building, you should play a political role in peacemaking or ending the occupation. The EU has many excuses all the time. I don't want to go into that. However, let's say under Hollande, and particularly Fabius, it was the French Foreign Minister Fabius who came up with the initiative that he feels that it should be an international solution, that the same old pattern of bilateral negotiations between occupier and occupied is not going to work. And so he suggested a three-phased approach. First, they've consulted with the parties, and they went around individually consulting with all the different, not just Palestine and Israel, but all the Arab countries, different European countries, even the US and so on. They finished this first phase of consultation. The second phase is to convene a meeting of the support group. As you know, part of the plan is to have an international support group, not just the quartet. We suggested the P5+1+, because we like the model of the P5+1. But plus means, you know, other Arab countries, other countries, maybe the BRICS countries and so on, so that you will expand the participation. We don't believe in an American monopoly. We don't believe in bilateral talks. We believe that there should be a greater participatory presence, including Europe, and not just the quartet, which became utterly useless. The quartet was entirely useless all these years. It was, you know, picked up when the US needed it, and it was put back in the freezer when they didn't want it, and so on. So, and it had no will of its own, actually. So this kind of setup to us is important. They set up this support group, and then in July, they're supposed to have an international conference. Now, our issue is not technical. We told them it's not a series of meetings, it's not a series of bodies. You have to look at the substance, and you have to look at the terms of reference. So to us, any initiative must be based on international law, as you rightfully said. It has to have clear terms of reference. You cannot violate international law. And all settlements are illegal regardless. You cannot start by talking about swaps. Why? Did we sign away any of our land? We didn't. You cannot start with any basis that violates UN resolutions about the illegality of the annexation of Jerusalem or about the rights of the refugees and so on. So we want to make sure that the terms of reference do not erode international law and international humanitarian law. This is one. Two, we need a binding timeline. You cannot go on an open-ended fishing expedition, as Clovis used to say. It is not open-ended, and it's not something that can go on forever and ever. Either you have a binding timeline, or there's no sense in doing more of the same, hoping for a different result, which the Americans keep doing over and over again. And they get the same result, and they're surprised. I mean, John Kerry was surprised that he didn't succeed. We told him. Anybody could have predicted it. So anyway, a binding timeline. And three, we wanted, first of all, terms of reference and binding timeline and clear defined objectives, 67 boundaries, two-state solution, Jerusalem as the capital, and so on, equitable solution of the refugee question. These are clear objectives. And then you need concrete steps. You cannot also talk about it in the abstraction, yes, we want to. What are the borders? Clearly, the capital. You need concrete steps to begin the dismantlement of settlements within this binding time frame. All right? And then you need the time frame for ending the occupation, not for the talks. Everybody talks about time frame for the talks. No. I mean, people have talked forever. I also will quote myself by saying we've invented more ways of negotiations than anybody on earth. Really. You know, we've had proximity talks, and close-up talks, and direct talks, and indirect talks, and bilateral talks, and multilateral talks, and exploratory talks, and epistolary talks, and track 1 and track 2 and track 3 talks. And we ended up lately with Twitter talks. People are sending each other tweets. Khalas, we're all talked out. Either you have a serious multilateral discussion on the issues with binding timelines, with concrete steps, begin the dismantlement of this occupation, remove the settlements, and let's move quickly before it's too late. Because there are people who believe the two-state solution is over already. And if it is over already, what do you propose in its place? That's a real question. A de facto one state is not in the making right now. It will be probably in the making after generations. But that gives Israel more time to do more damage. But anyway, we'll discuss that later. So that's the French initiative. We're trying to give it substance. We're trying to give it teeth. We're trying to get the international community involved in an effective way, and not just in a symbolic way like the quartet. A real way within a binding time frame, which requires also mechanisms for arbitration, which never existed because nobody wants to hold Israel accountable, including the Europeans, by the way. And not just arbitration, but you also need mechanisms for monitoring and verification, because whenever Israel violates agreements, nobody says anything. Should the Palestinians, heaven forbid, say they want to go to the UN, we are punished. Right? Why should you go to join the ICC? That's the end of the world. Accede to the Rome Statute, that's a nuclear weapon. What about, I mean, really, it's incredible how the Palestinians are being pressured and blackmailed and so on in order not to pursue the rightful path. And the Israelis who violated every single agreement and every single law and has been acting outside the law is never held to an account. And you remember when I talked about accountability and protection. When we started the talks, George, you also remember, Korean remember, we said we need two things. Protection for the Palestinians because we're under occupation and we're vulnerable, and accountability for Israel because it's a strong occupying power that has been using power without any checks. Until now, we don't have that. So that's why when we talked about accepting the French initiative, it falls within our approach to go the multilateral way, to end the American monopoly, to bring to bear international law, to have binding timelines and concrete steps and so on. Maybe there is a chance, maybe. But if you block off all avenues for the Palestinians. Nonviolent resistance, you know, the Israelis invent language. Netanyahu, he's so used to terrorism, using the word terrorism, that if we have protest marches and so on, he calls them popular terrorism. If we go to the UN, he called Mahmoud Abbas engaging in political terrorism. I said, you use the word over and over and over again, it loses its meaning. So what? So everybody's a terrorist, huh? Anyway, so you don't block off all peaceful means of resistance for the Palestinians. And then legal means, political means, human means, popular means, all these are a no-no. What happens? You leave us only with violence. Does that mean we should go back to armed struggle? I mean, that's the real issue, is that the Palestinians have tried every single responsible, moral, human way of trying to tell the world, look, this is an abnormal situation, it's a toxic situation, it's unjust, it's unfair, do something. And nobody wants to do something about it. So the French initiative, maybe. But ultimately, Israel is bent on destroying the two-state solution, and the difference is that now they make no secret of it. Now it's out there in the open. Huh? All you need to do is read their statements, read their pronouncements, read what they say. Netanyahu and everybody else. It's not just this coalition, government coalition in Israel, is the worst in history, really. It's the most hardline, extreme, right-wing, violent, militaristic, racist, overtly racist government in the history of Israel. And that's it. They don't hide their objectives. They don't want, not in my time, he says, we're going to live by the sword. So he's willing to use violence. He's willing to kill as many Palestinians as it takes to break the will. But no army, no matter how strong, has ever succeeded in breaking the will of a people, especially a people bent on their own, on getting their own freedom, their own dignity, their own independence.
I have a whole lot more questions to ask you about Obama and our U.S. elections and many other things. I'm going to ask one more question, then open the floor for the audience. So my last question is kind of in the vein of the nonviolent resistance and international pressure on Israel. It's been a little bit over 10 years since the formation of the BDS movement, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement by Palestinian civil society, which the larger aim is to make Israel abide by international law. If you could talk about the BDS movement, assess where it is and its successes and kind of current position internationally.
Yeah. No, that's a very important question, because the BDS movement is a civil society initiative, as you know, and it's a very important initiative with very remarkable historical precedents. It started with South Africa as a way of challenging the apartheid regime in South Africa, and it really made a strong difference. It forced the white regime in South Africa to pay attention. And, of course, it created internally a dynamic against apartheid and against discrimination, because they found themselves isolated and losing. They couldn't participate in any sports competition, in any academic, and so on. Anyway, so to Palestinian civil society, this was an initiative not only that should be emulated, but should be developed. Because if the whole world refuses to hold Israel accountable, then it's up to civil society and individuals and people around the world, public opinion, to hold Israel to account. And this provides people with the opportunity to act as ethical consumers, as ethical investors, to take up certain instruments that are available. You choose not to buy settler products, or you choose not to buy Israeli products, or you choose not to have. This is a matter of individual choice. It's a democratic choice. It's a free choice. And there are many people who do not want to violate international law and international humanitarian law and the rights of the Palestinians, and want to send a clear message to Israel that we have the right to hold you to account. Now, what's happening is that Israel waxed hysterical. It decided this is delegitimizing Israel. This is isolating Israel. And what's worse, the people who were more hysterical than Israel are the Congress. Ooh. Yeah, I mean really. They are criminalizing BDS, and they threaten to punish anybody in the world, even in Europe, not just in the US, that decides to adopt BDS as a means of holding Israel to account. They are willing to violate the democratic rights of their own citizens. In the same way as we told the Brits. The Brits took a law, adopted a law that says that local governments that chose to divest from Israel, that it's illegal to divest and to boycott and so on Israel. Why? I said, you are willing to violate. I mean, local governments are a sign of democracy, right? They chose, they voted, they decided that they don't want to invest in Israel or import Israel. Why should you violate their own rights to choose how to be consumers or how to invest or what kind of academic relationships they want and with whom? And they're willing to do that in order to defend Israel and Israeli criminality. It's not defending Israel, it's defending the occupation. And as I tell many Israelis, we are not delegitimizing you, the occupation is. And if they persist like this, they can no longer do things in the dark. Remember 1948? It was all in the dark. We had to wait for about, 30 years before the new historians, before people like Avi Shlaim and Ilan Pape, and to a certain degree Tom Segev and Benny Morris and so on, all these guys decided to expose, once the the intelligence archives were opened, to expose what really happened in 48. The ethnic cleansing, the terrorism, the massacres, the forced expulsions and so on. Before, it was the usual narrative, the Palestinians ran away at the behest of their leaders. The truth came out. Now we have social media. Now we have witnesses. Now people have access to the truth, and they know what's happening. And they want to exercise their right. You cannot deceive people all the time. So there is a change, there is a shift. And having witnessed that, people here, like the ilk of Adelson and Moscovich and so on, they're not only satisfied with buying a president, they also want to fight BDS everywhere. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent, not just on Congress and others to criminalize BDS, but to recruit people, even in universities, because universities have come out and have been outspoken in criticizing Israeli violations and criminality. I don't know whether they can do that in churches, but church groups were certainly among the pioneers of ethical investment and of divestment. So now they're trying to prevent not just the American people from and organizations from participating, they're also trying to intimidate everybody else, including the Europeans. They said we will not, or anybody in the world, we will not have any trade agreements with countries that practice BDS. So if you want to protect Israeli impunity, if you want to maintain Israel as a rogue state, because Israel is a rogue state, it lives outside the law, and it claims preferential treatment. It claims a sense of exceptionalism and entitlement. It claims that the law does not apply to it. And if you want to apply the law, like the very modest, hesitant way in which the Europeans decided, I'm sure you've heard of the guidelines and the labeling. Europe decided to label settlement products as not being made in Israel, but being made in settlements. Isn't this what everybody does? The origin, you need a certificate of origin, where what you're buying, where does it come from? The fact that they said settlement products have to be labeled in terms of where they come from, this is anti-Semitic. Why? I mean, you go buy something in the supermarket, you want to know where it's made, it's your right. You want to know, was it done by slave labor? Was it done by on stolen land? Was it? You want to consume ethically. You want to be an informed consumer or investor or partner or whatever. But Israel is not used to any kind of accountability, even a minimal, hesitant accountability. So they refuse this. And of course, who jumped to defend Israeli criminality and impunity? Congress. I don't want to go into Congress. Yeah. but maybe their own people will hold them to account one day. Maybe the public should also elect officials. And I'm very glad that there are people like Bernie Sanders who can stand up and speak out. And speaking of elections,
Yeah, you want to go ahead?
I will go ahead just to vent. Allow me to vent, please. Who was it? Henry Siegman, I think, had an article about Clinton, the panderer-in-chief. Yeah, he had an article called Hillary, the panderer-in-chief. This pandering going on, those of you who had the strong stomachs to listen to the speeches at AIPAC, did you? Listen. They recited the whole litany, everything. It's as if somebody like Lieberman and the Israeli Lieberman, not the American Lieberman, or Naftali Bennett or these guys had written these speeches. There's a whole checklist, not just Palestinian terrorism and so on, but Israeli right to self-defense. Israel is our strong ally and blah, blah, no daylight between us. They recited everything, you know, this exactly the way this extreme right-wing government, not even having anything to do with reality or the facts. And they got all these standing ovations from AIPAC. And you would think that they were running for office in Israel. I would tell you, if they're running for office in Israel, they wouldn't get the same percentage of votes they would get here in the States. Really. It's incredible that you have to show allegiance to a foreign country and that you are a good for a foreign country rather than being good for your own people. This is amazing to us. It's and the fact that Netanyahu has succeeded in humiliating and insulting the executive branch repeatedly and getting away with it has also undermined the standing of the US everywhere. Because if some nut like Netanyahu can get away with insulting your president and can get 30 standing ovations from a yo-yo Congress, this means that they have no value. Who's this president? And if his own Congress does not stand up for national pride, and if you can insult your president and and if he can intervene in domestic politics and side with Romney and then side with the Republicans and then side with this and then incite against an agreement that was supposed to protect Israel from the so-called Iranian threat, and decided to mobilize, they called AIPAC, to mobilize Congress to fight against the Iranian deal, and for the first time AIPAC lost. So that's a turning point as well. For the first time AIPAC did not dictate congressional policy or stance. So AIPAC is not the all-powerful, perfect God, but anyway, one has to understand that unless the Americans lay claim to their own policies and can hold their own elected officials responsible and accountable, they will continue to owe allegiance to AIPAC and to a distorted version of reality, dehumanizing the Palestinians, excluding the Palestinians, and supporting Israeli violations to the detriment of American interests and American national interests and American security. It's ironic that only the military, the generals, were telling the politicians that what Israel is doing in the region is undermining not just our credibility, but is threatening the lives of our men and women abroad. And that we cannot afford to keep paying for the mistakes of Israel, for the violations and the violence of Israel. And we cannot afford to keep giving them more money. But Obama decided that he has to prove that he's good for Israel too. Regardless of the fact that when he came to office and he made that Cairo speech and he raised expectations, you all heard his Cairo speech. And we said, what a breath of fresh air. Somebody who will say things like they are, who will reach out to the world, who will not subscribe to the clash of civilizations, who will not exclude the Palestinians or the Muslims or the Arabs and so on, and who will speak in a clear, rights-based narrative approach. Suddenly, I mean, the Israelis thumbed their nose at him. So he said, I shouldn't have talked about settlements. What do you mean you should? It was the right approach. You should have talked about it. You should have told them to stop settlements, and then you should have held them to account, because they didn't. Instead of saying they refused to listen to me, so I'm sorry I made a mistake that I asked them to do this. This was really bad, because when you back down like this and you change because the Israelis are intransigent, and it doesn't bode well for your policies or your standing. And it continued downhill all the way through, to the point where he was placed on the defensive to prove that he is good for Israel. Now he's giving them 40 billion for the next 10 years, and they don't want to sign it because they say it's not enough. They will wait for the next president, knowing that if it's Hillary or if it's who, Trump or congratulations, yes. That they will get more. I mean, the arrogance, I don't know, I've never seen so much arrogance. And yet, he is the one president who gave Israel more money and more weapons than any other president in the history of the US. And they still are not satisfied with him. And they still criticize him, and they still say he's not good for Israel, so that the next president has to do more to prove that he's good for Israel. So good luck, you guys, really.
Thank you for a very engaging, can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you for a very engaging and insightful talk. I have two quick questions. In the beginning of your talk, you said that there's like a confrontation between Palestinian civil society and the leadership. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate and give us some examples of where things are at, or, you know, what the confrontations are about. And you've also painted a very gloomy a picture of where things are at. Is there anything to be optimistic about?
Maybe we should have one question per person.
Oh, okay, one question per person, and please make it brief. Do you want to take more than one? Is that okay with you, or do you want to answer
it's
each
up
one?
to you. I mean,
Okay, because just this way we can have more people. Yes, go ahead.
But if you could mention your name so I can
Okay.
respond.
Okay, that's Manal.
Manan.
Manal Jamal.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much. My name's Elena Yusuf. I'll stop there. You did talk about BDS, which I think is probably one of the most important things for us here in the States. I don't know if people read it. I just read it a couple of days ago, that Hillary actually wrote a letter to Saban back in July of last year. And I guess she did that to avoid him asking her, because then by giving so many millions to her, it would look like he was tampering. But I guess if she asks him, even though I think he wrote the letter himself, I urge people to look at it. I just don't know what can be done. I know you mentioned Sheldon Adelson, and also, of course, Haim Saban, who is the #1 backer of Hillary, and he said he'll pay anything to have her elected. I guess at a time they worked together on the BDS issue. So my concern is, what can we do about that, since yes, I am a Bernie Sanders supporter. I used to be a Hillary supporter. After the AIPAC speech, I can't do it. And so having said that I'm a Bernie supporter, there isn't anybody besides him who is not bought and paid for. And I know, yes, anti-Semitic. I'm sorry, I'm not anti-Semitic. But I do believe in the good of this country. And also now we're cut off with the media. I didn't know until recently that Saban also was a co-owner of Univision, that they have their hands in all these aspects. How can we do anything? What can the diaspora of Palestine do in conjunction with the Arab world, and specifically Palestine, to have people understand that they are not getting the truth? And I'm talking about Republicans and Democrats.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay. Is there another one on this side? Okay. Over there.
Just very quickly, there was a Brookings Institution
Can you
scholar.
wait, Steve?
Steve France. There was a Brookings Institution scholar whose name I don't remember, but he was Arab, it seems. And he suggested that Obama could make a last-ditch saving move for his Middle East legacy by simply recognizing the state of Palestine, as many other states have done. Any chance?
Do you want to take these three?
Yeah,
and then
okay,
we'll
I'll
them
take
all?
these three.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I was being really brutally frank with you, with everybody, Manal, about civil society and the problems between civil society and the government. There is a sort of competition over constituency, over legitimacy, over leadership, and over funding. And at a certain point, the weaker the executive branch felt, or the government and the leadership felt, the more they felt threatened by civil society. This manifested itself in several ways. One, we have a new sort of burst of legislation, absent legislative council. The government is starting to legislate things about, you have to disclose not just where your money comes from, but if you are a non-profit organization, you have to get permission from the government to raise funds, and then you have to get permission to spend these funds and so on. So of course people were furious with that. We know that Israel is doing worse because Israel is deliberately targeting its human rights organizations and so on. That plus refusal to cooperate, for example, with like the Anti-Corruption Commission and so on, which they used to before. Now there's an ongoing dialogue. We started the dialogue. Like when they passed the the law on information, I got lots of calls and I asked to see the draft because they passed it, the government, without even having people engage in a public discussion of the draft legislation. And I looked at it, and it was sort of like the 1950s type of draft where you control everything and you censor everything and so on. So we protested. I called the president and I called the prime minister and I said, this cannot pass. We formed a committee. We had several meetings of people who were informed and engaged in freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of the media and so on. And we managed to get them to back down and to refuse to deal and to cancel that draft, and we prepared a new draft with everybody engaged in it, and a very nice new open law. And I said, we signed all these conventions and agreements internationally, and we have to be bound by them. Because when we sign, let's say, UNCAC, or when we sign CEDAW, or the rights of the child and so on, these are ways in which we safeguard our society to ensure that we do respect human rights, we do respect fundamental freedoms, and that we do have a system of good governance. So we have to make sure that all our legislation is consistent with the requirements of these conventions and agreements. So now we are doing that. We're doing that also with the Social Security law, with the new law, and with the law on higher education and so on. These are things I'm engaged in. So in a sense, the more active and intrusive civil society is, the better it is as a safeguard of democracy and rights and freedom. So it's not a lost cause at all. The more insecure the government feels, the more it will attack. But then you cannot allow it to go down that path, because you have to have the courage to stand up and to say that's not who we are and we will not put up with this. So it's happening. Is there anything to be optimistic about? I think, look, yes, I think in the long, we are undergoing, again, to go a dark night of the soul. We are undergoing a very difficult and critical period. And in many ways, Palestinians became so self-critical that many times when I go abroad and people tell me, what do we do and so on, they're much more critical of themselves. I said, don't digress. Don't forget what the cause is. The cause is freedom, dignity, self-determination, and so on for the Palestinian people. It is not who's right, Fatah or Hamas. It is not how corrupt this is or how not. Or let's keep the discussion at the core issues. And to me, the important thing is that the Palestinians have not been defeated. There is really a spirit of defiance. There is really a spirit of persistence. And again, I will quote myself by saying, we are not ready to disappear, and we are not ready to commit collective suicide or have collective amnesia, and we are not ready to succumb and surrender. So it will take time. In the long run, we will prevail, because we're here on our land, and we will struggle. In the short run, yes, there will be houses demolished, there will be irreplaceable lives lost, there will be resources stolen, Israel will expand. But the problem is the short-term and short-sighted greed that's trumping long-term peace. This will be their downfall. They are going to bite a bit more than they can chew. They cannot swallow us all, and they cannot expel us all. And it's going to be a difficult time. I don't look at it as a demographic issue or, as I said, a sexist issue of who can have more children, but I see it as a question of rights. You can coast for so long relying on the blind support of certain countries or on the ignorance of people. But then at a certain point, the tide will turn. There will be, to use a cliche, a tipping point. I don't like to use that, but there will be a turning point, let's put it that way. And if they insist on Greater Israel being superimposed on historical Palestine, then the language changes. Then you could say the whole deal is off. I accepted to share Palestine with you. You don't want to share it. Then maybe I want all of Palestine. That's what they're doing in changing the discourse, in changing the basis of the agreement, is that they don't want to share Palestine, they want it all. Then the Palestinians will go back to the basics of this was all of it was ours. And we offered to share it with you, and you don't want to. The days in which we all said all or nothing, we were told you get nothing. Now Israel is saying all or nothing, so maybe they should get nothing. You don't know. So in the long run, I think there is no way that the Palestinians can be dismissed from history or can be deprived of their rights, including the right to freedom and dignity and self-determination. And I think it will happen. We just have to make sure that as we undergo this difficult period, even if there is a breakdown, and there's a chance that there might be, we have gone through so many different phases and difficult phases that we will be able not only to survive this, but also to prevail. And the younger generations, one generation after the other, is saying, we are here, we are alive, and we will pursue this, we will continue. So that's optimistic. As far as BDS and Hillary and Saban and so on, Elena? Yeah. Look, I mean, Saban is like Adelson, but each one wants to choose by his own president. And unfortunately, this is the electoral system where if you have so much money, you can intervene in that way. It's no secret that the first thing Hillary said was what? If you elect me, then I will undo the damage that Obama did in relations with Israel, right? The first thing I will do is not meet with my constituents and so on. I will hold a meeting with Netanyahu. I mean, a paragon of virtue, you will hold a meeting with Netanyahu. When they talk about we have shared values, I said, what values? Occupation, oppression, collective punitive measures, impunity, and so on. Are these your shared values? It's amazing. But I mean, I don't want to interfere. I'm not going to vote for anybody here, and I'm not an American, thank you. Otherwise, I would, have a hard time finding a real candidate. But you're right. I mean, as I said, Bernie is a breath of fresh air. I saw a T-shirt. Did you see a T-shirt? My daughter sent me a T-shirt. It says, Bernie Sanders in Arabic. And isn't it ironic that Arabs, Palestinians, and Muslims all want a Jewish president? And the Jews and the Israelis all want a fundamentalist evangelical president? Yeah, I know, yes, you're right. But the Israelis, the right-wing Israelis, and Engel he's from New York, right? He came out with such a hateful language against Bernie. It was amazing. But look, the fact that he's saying these things and he's not being buried, politically, means that there is a ray of hope in the U.S. There is. That people like Adelson, Moskovich, and even Saban are not the ones who are going to dictate, neither to the Jewish community as a whole, nor to the people who are in search of freedom and genuine democracy and so on. So maybe there is room for revolution in the U.S. Palestinians and Arabs, I mean, look, I call them exiles more than diaspora. Palestinians outside have a real responsibility. And it's not easy being a Palestinian. I know it. And being a Palestinian in the US, actually it was much more difficult before. I remember when I was told I didn't exist, I had to argue with people that actually I did exist. You know, when I was a student here, many moons ago, I was many years ago, people didn't know who the Palestinians. We were either the Aristotelian dualism of pity and fear. We were either pitiful refugees or fearful terrorists. We were not human beings, or we didn't exist at all. We were Pakistanis, probably, with a misspelling. So. So there are more inroads, and you can have alliances and networks, and cyberspace is very good for mobilizing. It's not good for organizing on the ground. We could talk about this forever, but it's very good for mobilizing and for getting the language out, for getting the discourse, for getting the truth out, and for challenging. It's very important. And you can do that, and you should be connected also back home. There are many allies. There are. I don't want to spell out who your allies are here. You know them. You have many allies. I mean, look, the people who have been very outspoken, like the Jewish Voices for Peace, for example, they have been very courageous. Even J Street, when they talk about being pro-Israeli, but at the same time, you know, they're pro-peace, and so they help to expose. Don't expect everybody to recite the same message that you have, but you have things in common with different people. Like the Black Lives Matter. They came to Palestine, they met, they went, they saw the walls, they saw everything, and they formed, you know, this identification, these ties. People who are oppressed, discriminated against, and so on, generally find a common language and perceptions together. That's what you can do, but also you must challenge the prevailing version, because we have been so labeled and stereotyped and excluded. You cannot sit back and accept this version. You have to challenge it constantly. You have to speak out, and you cannot be intimidated. That's important. Steve, you're talking about El-Gindi, who said, yes, I think Khalid El-Gindi, yes. Yeah, he did write about how maybe the one thing that they can do is recognize Palestine as a response, of course, to Israel's refusal to cooperate in any way, shape, or form with the American administration. I mean, Israel has totally stepped over everything that this government wanted. But I think it's not going to happen. I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you. They're even trying very hard to pressure other countries not to recognize us. They pressured France, because after Fabius left and you have a new foreign minister, he immediately said it's not an automatic thing, because they said if they do not cooperate or if they make us fail, then we will recognize Palestine immediately. I would hold a much more modest step. Maybe they shouldn't veto UN resolutions. Maybe. That should be the beginning of the Declaration of Independence by the US. Right. Maybe they should stop putting pressure on other countries not to recognize Palestine. Maybe they should stop acting as the agents of Israel globally. That would help. But until they get to the point where they recognize Palestine as, again, an act of legality and as an act of humanity and political astuteness. Because if they really are interested in peace, in democracy, in moderation, and so on, then the path to that in our part of the world is not just the recognition of Palestine, but the making sure that Palestine does come about as a real sovereign, independent state. This would help. Thank you.
We are running out of time.
No.
Okay, all right.
All right, we'll take one more question. You've been
I'm
very
Nancy
patiently
Latif.
waiting.
I came from Connecticut.
Oh, Nancy,
Okay.
that's so nice. Yes.
So thank you for taking
you can
my
make
question.
a statement also if you want.
Well, well, I love Connecticut. Is that good enough? And I love Palestine. يا أختي أنا ما شاء الله عليكي يا الله يعطيكي العافية والصحة إن شاء الله يا رب. Okay, حبيبتي. I have two questions. A hard one, I'm sorry, and a fluff question. Which do you want first?
I don't care. We don't have much time.
Actually, could you just ask one question, please?
The
Because we don't have
PA
time.
months ago said it was no longer to coordinate security with Israeli forces. Has that in fact happened? And who are some of the Palestinian political and cultural leaders you most admire?
Okay. Both very good questions.
Thank
Let
you.
me say. There was a decision by the Central Council of Palestine to stop security coordination and to redefine the relationship with Israel, as you know, on all aspects: security, political, legal, economic. This has not happened yet. They had several meetings. They turned the meetings into asking the Israelis not to carry out encroachments into areas A. Because, of course, this is something that Israel has been doing. As I said, it has reneged on all agreements, including the fact that Area A is under the full control, security control and others, of the PA. And the Israelis said, we will stop carrying out raids and entering Ramallah and Jericho first. Remember the days when they talked about Gaza, Jericho first? Mm-hmm. Now they talk about Ramallah, Jericho. They won't carry out incursions there, and they will test us for a few months, and then they will decide if they will stop. I mean, if they will start honoring their agreements. So and then the Palestinian security leaders came out and said, you see, we insisted on the territorial integrity and unity of areas A. And the agreements we were talking about the territorial unity and integrity of Palestine. Now we're of Gaza and the West Bank and Jerusalem. Now we're talking about less than 10% as territorial unity and integrity. This is amazing to me. This is what happens, the attrition of language and perceptions. This is what happens when for a long time your expectations and your demands and your rights and so on are so begin a process of shrinkage and erosion where you end up just asking for not to enter areas A. I believe that we do have to redesign and redefine all our relationship with Israel. Israel is an occupying power. Israel lives outside the law. Israel deliberately victimizes every single Palestinian. Our land, our rights, our resources, it has devalued our lives. And therefore Israel has to be held to account. I don't see why we should be held to agreements that we signed and that were not fair in the first place, that were severely flawed, while Israel is exempt from either abiding by its agreements or from even respecting international law or moral law or human rights law. Look, there are many I'm much more in the cultural. I like more. My two favorite people who were the very, very close friends of mine have passed away. So I don't know if that says anything about my demise. But Edward Said, who was my external reader on my dissertation, he was a wonderful, wonderful man. And Mahmoud Darwish, whom I love dearly. Yes, these are the two giants intellectually and in literary terms and culturally and so on. But there are lots of, we have a wonderful, thriving cultural movement. We have dance troupes, we have the Academy of Music, the Conservatoire, and we have lots of wonderful people. We have the orchestra, youth orchestra, as well as the Palestine Orchestra. We have painters who are remarkable, and the young painters are coming out, by the hundreds, not even the dozens. That's amazing. And there is a thriving cultural life. I don't know about politicians in Palestine, you mean? I told you I'm a civil society person. To me, my models are not politicians. I mean, look, I had a close friend in Mandela. We were very good friends, but he's not Palestinian, although we claim him. But he's the only one whom I thought of as a politician. He's not really a politician. He's a revolutionary. Layla, you're suggesting somebody? No. You raised your hand. I thought you knew a politician we could. No, we cannot, although we are being isolated now. We are marginalized.
Because of what's happening, the demise of the Arab world.
Yes.
And this is very sadly. And even, our children were born here.
Yeah.
So active. Tweet and the rise and the email and so on. So our cause is not going to die, like you said, because even our children and grandchildren, they know about it.
That's true.
But we are so disgusted with the Arab world.
Look, the Arab world is undergoing a very painful, bloody, and unpredictable transition. And there are lots of factors at work. I don't think you have more proxy wars, more armies in one country as you have in Syria, for example. Syria is not fighting its own war. It's not just the regime and the opposition. It's everybody who has any interest and who has any proxy war who's in Syria right now. So that's why it's important to solve this. Look, historically, you had this polarization between a corrupt, inept national regime and between the only alternative being a religious, ideological, political Islam, for example. The democratic forces and so on were the most easily suppressed. So the pendulum has been swinging, you know. They brought down the regimes, but the young did not take over. And look, in Egypt, what happened? The young, the women, the reformers, people who brought down the Mubarak regimes were not organized enough on the ground to get the vote out. And that's the only way you can come into power. You bring down something, but you have to be in place to take over. And the only people who were organized on the ground were the Muslim Brotherhood. So they took over, they tried to change the regime, the pendulum swung to the other extreme again, and now you have also a military system in Egypt. Now people are being told you can choose the chaos of disintegration, deconstruction, and so on, or the assurance of a dictatorial, autocratic system. What do you choose? Democracy is very difficult. And giving people the vote and respecting their rights and so on means you have to accept a period of instability. I'm sure the Arab world will come through the other side well, but what they're going through is extremely painful, and it's the people who are paying the price, frankly speaking. From Libya to Yemen and in between to Iraq and so on. And they did not happen just by self-inflicted wounds. They were all, the moment they decided that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and they attacked Iraq, all hell broke loose in our part of the world. That's it. Because many systems collapsed, and I don't want to go into history now, but all sorts of forces that were dormant in the region or that were active during the Cold War came out, and it was okay so long as they were killing only Arabs or Muslims or whatever. But once they started exporting their form of violence and terrorism and so on all over the world, then people noticed, whoops, we've got to do something about this. It's like the Obama doctrine now. What does he say? I will end with this. He has the three eyes in our part of the world. He cares about Iran to make sure that it's contained and no weapons of mass destruction. He cares about ISIS, and he calls it ISIL. And I keep telling people, please don't call it ISIL because it's Daesh. ISIL sounds like asal in Arabic. It's nice and honey and so on. But Daesh is really the word. And he has this war. I don't know how they're conducting this war, I guess. And he has Israel. The three eyes. And Israel's security. And how does he define Israel's security? Military domination, exceptionalism, and impunity. This is unacceptable. This is not how you look at the region. You do not. What about the peace? What about peace? What about Palestine? What about protection? What about positive participation? None of the P's apply, all the I's apply, and we're in trouble. So the Arab world, yes, it is under and has diverted attention and resources and support and so on, but it's not a done deal. The Arab world will come out, will join the 21st century. It will take time, and there are non-state actors and there are other actors all engaged, but eventually it will work out, I believe. So Palestine is part of the Arab world. Thank you.
Thank you all for your questions. I apologize we couldn't take more of them, but it's 2:30, and I promised Hanan we would be done by now. I really want to thank you, Dr. Ashrawi, for your forthright and candid assessments and analyses and answers to our questions. And you're always welcome here at the Palestine Center. Ahlan wa sahlan.